Dear students, parents, families, friends, trustees, and colleagues, welcome. I want to begin by acknowledging that this is the first time we have been together in one room as a community since our opening assembly in September 2019. Many months and one... That's many months and one pandemic ago. It is so good to see you all here, although at the moment I can't see any of you. I want to thank the Mahaiwe Performing Arts Center for making it possible for us to be here, and particularly the staff that helped us put it all together, Michael Buth, Lucas Pavelski, Caitlin Thiele, and the people who work with them. This evening continues one of the school's oldest traditions, hearing from members of the senior class regarding their projects and internships. Our first senior night in the spring of 2006 included a cello performance, a scene from Angels in America, and a report on work in a hospital. Since then, with the exception of last year's class, sidelined by a pandemic, every senior in our school has stood before this community as these students will do in a moment. Each year we remember the unformed mass of ninth graders who entered our school 4 years earlier, and we marvel at the remarkable individual young persons who are about to leave us. Through the years of high school, it brings us great joy to see each of them become themselves. In the past, for projects and internships, students have made fine furniture, repaired airplane engines, translated English to Spanish for an immigration law firm in New York City, worked with archaeologists in Boston, danced, assembled BMWs in Munich, held a cow's abdomen closed for a veterinarian following a C-section, worked for Harney Teas and Barrington Coffee Roasters, worked for a music video production company in Los Angeles, written for the Berkshire Eagle and the New York Sun, researched gun rights for a local politician, and on and on and on. I want to acknowledge that finding and completing a project or internship this year under the pressures of COVID was not easy, and yet you are about to see a remarkable array of work from the talented class of 2021. We are recording this evening's presentations, and the video will be available on our YouTube channel within a few days. Please invite those who couldn't make it tonight to watch. Finally, following the senior presentations, we will have a brief closing assembly for the school year. Yes, there's technically one more week of school, but the core faculty and I wanted to take advantage of being here with you all in person to close the school year in style. Students will present in alphabetical order, starting with Kenneth Bellamy. Kenny?
Hi, I'm Kenneth Bellamy, and I bought a car. I bought this car for $2,500 with a faulty power steering pump, no sway bar, thank you, and missing climate controls. There ended up being much more wrong with it than that. I bought it and I replaced the parts and got it on the road, and within maybe 5 miles, the check engine light came on. This is a reoccurring occurrence you'll see throughout the project. So, next slide. I checked the code and it told me that the timing belt was messed up. So I went and I replaced it, but that didn't fix the problem. If anything, it made it worse. And I decided that I would cheat just a little bit and go to the dealership and ask them what they could tell me about it and how maybe they could fix it. I paid for that cheating. So I ended up spending maybe $1,400 on repairs through them, and it didn't fix it, and it made it even worse than it was before, and ended up making more problems than I could have expected. So for future preferences, I will be doing everything myself. Next slide. After the run-in with the dealership, I decided that I would buy another engine after more problems persisted throughout the time of driving it. And so I bought from a junkyard a 2005 engine for my car. I have a 2006, but they match right up. When I was at the junkyard, I saw the headlights on the donor car and the exhaust system were a lot nicer than my car's, and so I bought those with it. That counts for the modding that I had wanted to do for this car. I can show some finished pictures of the way it looked after I finished, put all the things on, the lights. Just go through them for me, thank you. The interior, you saw in the first picture, I just painted some panels and cleaned things up. The exhaust system, and then obviously just a couple more pictures of it. Now, I hope to get the rest of the problems that have persisted since I put the engine in fixed by the end of June. I'm just really happy that it's running and that the amount of stuff that I've learned. The project really opened up my ability to work on things that I don't understand and to take the initiative and learn. It also helps me to decide what and where I wanted to go for college. So I'm going to Columbia Green Community College for mechanics in the fall. And see, if I had the choice to go back and not spend the money I spent and not take the time I took to fix the car, I would. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm overjoyed on the experiences that I got through it. And I want to thank my dad, my sister Kaylee, and her husband Heath for helping me with the mechanics aspect. And I definitely want to thank my mom, who made the project possible by giving me advances in money. Because, yeah, I needed that. So I promise I'll pay you back. Thank you guys so much. Have a nice night.
Hi everyone, my name's Julia Colodny. I'm a senior at Berkshire Waldorf High School. So for my project, I did a series of 6 acrylic paintings based off of the general theme of isolation. So for my paintings, I used canvases of different sizes. So isolation was mostly a general theme so that I could kind of decide like what to take pictures of and paint. So a lot of the paintings that I made are kind of unique to each other or not very similar or series looking. When I was first starting my project, my original plan was to not spend any money and use what I already had. So I found canvases in my house, and I actually originally started off with oil paints, but I ended up not really liking the texture. So about maybe a third of the way through my first painting, I switched over to acrylics. So one of my paintings is very textured. Not that one. My advisor was Dr. Broussard, and though I typically prefer to work by myself, her advice was always really helpful, and I think she really understood what I was trying to get at. I learned a lot from this project. One thing I learned was that I need to paint during the day because some days I would be like painting as it was getting dark out, and like the lighting would change and the colors would look different, so it would be harder to get on paper what I was trying to paint. Another thing I learned was that sometimes paintings don't feel ready to add details, but I just kind of have to add them anyway, or else they'll never get done. One of the biggest challenges for me was like trying to figure out what pictures to paint. and also taking the pictures, because I'm not really a photographer, but I could be a little bit of a perfectionist at times, so I was always like looking through the pictures and I was like, which one do I paint? I have to know the perfect one so I don't waste a canvas and then have to spend money. The project also forced me to be frugal with some colors, because typically I put all my focus into like one painting that I'm doing, but I had 6 different paintings, so I was kind of like trying to not use like any black or any white unless I knew for sure that that would be perfect. Yeah, I love painting, but I rarely do it, so this was kind of good practice for me. Stop going through the slides, thanks. I prefer to put I've never done a painting series before, so I definitely prefer to put all my focus into one painting, because I feel like that can make the painting better rather than kind of being all over the place and focusing on random paintings all at once. Can you go back to the first painting? Thank you. Okay, now I'm gonna say something about each of my paintings. So this painting, I actually took this picture back in April 2019. It was the only old picture that I painted. I just I felt like it kind of seemed isolated. It's kind of like lonely, a nice lonely spring day. Next slide. So that one was inspired just because I was in my room and I have this pink LED light, and I was like, maybe I could like put my hands in the air and like have it like, you know, have my hands be isolated. And I used the self-timer, so that was one thing that was always really helpful to me. Next slide. So that one I took one day when I was walking around Hudson, and the water just looked really nice. Next one. That's my cat, Bella. She's my best friend. Next one. That was my mom on Christmas. I like walked into the room and she looked really peaceful in there. I was like, Mom, stay still, let me take a picture of you. And she was like, no, I look too ugly. But then I showed her the picture and she was like, oh, I actually like it. Okay, next. That's just me lying on my bed, bored and lonely. Next picture. Oh, that's the last one? Okay, yep, that's all my paintings, and I intend to sell all of them, so if anyone's interested in buying a painting, let me know. All right, thanks everyone.
Hi, my name's Sadie, and for my senior project, I wrote an album for guitar and voice, and I recorded it with Andrew Thompson at Pikeman Studios. Next slide. So my album is called June EP. I called it that because it's June right now. June is my middle name, and it's my favorite month, so I thought it was fitting. That's my album cover. Thank you so much to Linda Ripley for taking the pictures for it. I'm like so honored to have your photography on my cover. It looks great. So I've always loved music ever since I was little. I have played piano since I was really little and like to sing. I don't like sing in front of people very often, but you know, just jamming out in my room and stuff like that. And I learned to play guitar last spring over quarantine. YouTube and a couple of my friends taught me. And I really liked it. And yeah. So the inspiration for June EP is, it's kind of like an album centered around the themes of like nostalgia, growing up, and personal change. And so a lot of my inspiration for songs comes like directly from my life, and so the music is pretty personal. It's not all of the songs are exact true stories, and some of them I just made up, but in general, the inspiration is pretty personal. And I was inspired by artists like Ani DeFranco, Jeff Tweedy, and Green Day. Those are 3 of my inspirations. I'm going to talk a little bit about my songwriting process. So what I usually do is I have a feeling that I'm trying to capture, or I'll think of a couple words while I'm out walking, and I'll be like, oh, that would be a good song. And so I try to capture like a feeling with my music. Over the winter, I wrote probably between 20 and 25 songs, not all of which are finished, definitely not all of which are good. Some of them are never leaving my notebook. But I picked 4 of them in the end that I really liked and recorded them to make my little album. So I originally started by recording them in my upstairs bathroom because it has good acoustics, and I used GarageBand, and I really liked how they came out. But then I found out that a friend of a friend, Andrew Thompson, runs a recording studio. It's called Pipeman Studios, and so I went to record with him. And it was a really cool experience to be able to record in a professional studio. Andrew showed me how to do all the technical stuff, and he handled all that like equipment, computery things that I don't really know how to do, and he helped like master my music and get it ready to put out. So thank you so much, Andrew. I like really couldn't have done it without you, and I'm so grateful for all your help. My album, I'm gonna put it on Spotify, Apple Music, and SoundCloud, and it's coming out next week if you want to listen to it. Yeah, my artist name is Just June, and it's June EP. Anything else I want to say? I don't think so. Okay, I'm gonna play one of my songs for you. It's called 17, and it was the inspiration for my album. I wrote it at the end of last summer. All here? Okay. All right. Bare feet on meadow street, butterfly air. Walking down the road at night, I don't know where I'm going. Ooh, 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 ooh. My life is rushing past a breakneck speed. A few more seconds, it'll be next week. Sometimes it feels like next week can't come soon enough. Ooh, missing you and you're right next to me. Why can't I just be someone I used to be? And why you gotta tell me who I've got to be? So why can't I just be someone I used to be? What
Imagine sunset doesn't feel like it used to. There are fewer colors in the sky. My last summer is slipping through my fingertips. Me and you. La, la. My life is rushing past a breakneck speed. A few more seconds, it'll be next week. Just wanna be a kid while I still have the time. Ooh, missing you when you're right next to me. Why can't I just be someone I used to be? But that girl's gone and I hated her anyway. So why you telling me to be someone I used to be? Why you telling me to be someone I used to be? You say I've changed, but this is the real me, I swear it. So don't you dare tell me to be that girl I used to be. I can't remember who it is I used to be.
Hi, my name is Lucas. For my project, I did music production and sound design. I learned to use synthesizers to sculpt the sounds we hear in pop music and how to produce and arrange songs on the computer. For this presentation, I thought I would give a little look into how synthesis works and then demonstrate some sounds for you on this synthesizer right here. Most of the instruments you hear in pop music aren't real instruments in the sense that they once were. They don't come from a real sound. You're not hearing a plucked guitar string, air through an organ pipe, or a stick hitting a drum. These sounds are synthesized. They come from machines and are generated essentially from thin air. But every sound was designed by somebody. What attracted me to synths was the endless possibilities that they bring. I'm a guitar player, and with that one instrument, there are limits on the sounds that I can make. I can't play drums with my guitar. During the pandemic, it was hard to meet other musicians, but with synthesizers, it was like having a whole band right here in my bedroom. I started by learning the most approachable type of synthesis, analog subtractive synthesis. With subtractive synthesis, you start with a complex waveform, and then use a filter to remove harmonics and make it into a more musical tone. So, since I have a synthesizer right here, I can show you how these diagrams here actually sound. So this is a sawtooth waveform. And here it is filtered. a triangle, and a square. These waveforms, with the filter changing over time, can create a very pleasant and musical sound. Slide. A second type of synthesis I had the privilege of working with is called frequency modulation. Frequency modulation is much more complicated, and learning to program it was much harder. It took me a long time to be able to make sounds that were actually musical and didn't just sound like TV static. Slide. Here's a nice diagram of what's happening inside of an FM synthesizer, and don't worry, I won't be going into detail on this one. Essentially, you start with a simple waveform and add more to create a more complex sound. Slide. What I've learned about synthesis has also helped me make new sounds with my guitar. And in addition to sound design, I've been learning how to produce and arrange sounds with computers in a digital audio workstation. With all this, I can produce full songs here in my bedroom. Now, I'll demonstrate a more complex sound with my analog subtractive synthesizer. And since synthesizers like this in our culture are most commonly associated with the futurist pop music of the 1980s, I thought it was only fitting that I made a very cheesy science fiction sound. You know. Changing the filter over time creates this swirling effect, and using an effect called resonance, which creates a peak in the frequencies that are filtered off, I can create that sort of squeak that builds in as the filter changes, which makes a pretty interesting effect. Finally, I thought I'd show a sound like this in a musical context. Here's a small little thing I made just for today. Not a full song, just a minute, but it uses this nice swirly sound. All right, that's all for me. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amelia, and my senior project was a series of paintings on canvas. I would like to thank my mentor, Gail Downey, for her time, her expertise, and her unending support and willingness to answer every question I could possibly ask. For my project, I used various types of paint, and I did 3 paintings on canvases roughly 3 by 4 feet. And this year I began each piece with several thick layers of gesso, and then I continued on by familiarizing myself with different types of paint and tools. Next slide. I use things like my hands, I used tissue paper, aluminum cans, and really anything I could get my hands on. I love taking the everyday objects and using them as tools to visualize like my emotions and memories and putting them on the canvas. Next slide. I found that the drip effect and the contrast it creates is very appealing to me personally. I loved using spray paint to create a multi-layered image that included different levels of gloss and matte finish. Another technique that I felt personally drawn to was using large amounts of thick paint to create a 3D effect, because when I was younger, I was always fascinated by art with paint so thick that you could run your fingers along it and not only see, but like feel the art. Next slide. In these paintings, I tried to visualize complex ideas of gender that I had to deal with growing up. When I was in 3rd grade, my class went on a mother-daughter hike, and although I only found about it the day after it happened because I wasn't invited, I was sad and confused as a child because I didn't understand why my class wouldn't invite me to come along. Was I not a daughter who also had a mother? It wasn't until much later on I found out I wasn't invited because they thought I would be more comfortable with the boys. This event really stuck with me for most of my childhood, and I was always grappling with being who I wanted to be, dressing how I wanted to dress, and cutting my hair as short as I wanted, while at the same time constantly worrying if people thought I was a boy. Next slide. In my work, I tried to highlight the confusion and absurdity that comes from aggressively pushing gender norms on children. I enjoyed using the high-flow gold and silver paints to represent the never-ending grasp the talons of capitalism has on our innocence in childhood. Next slide. On my second On my second painting, I used a sculpting medium to bring out the eyes and make them more 3D. For me personally, this represents the anxiety one might feel due to strangers in public visually analyzing you to figure out if you're a boy or a girl. In the same painting, I used smiling and frowning faces to represent the duality of being encouraged to be who you are and also having people tell you to be a certain way at the same time. I would absolutely recommend that somebody choose this type of project. I think we all know that we get the most change in the world when we focus on who we are as individuals, and I think that art is a great way to start. Through this project, I learned that it's not only okay, but also good to push the boundaries of what we consider as tools for art. And I also learned that we might all be better off if we took the time to consider what these gender norms mean for all of us, and how we can create a society where children can just enjoy being a child and not worry about being a boy or a girl. I would once again like to thank Gail for her unending support and my family for putting up with an art studio in their dining room for a couple of months. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lulu Levy, and for my senior internship, I worked as a data science intern at Epic Sciences. Epic is a biotech company that's based in San Diego, and it has developed liquid biopsy cancer tests that are essentially less invasive than a typical surgical biopsy. How this works is that when you have a tumor, these bits of cell called cell-free DNA, they basically break off from the tumor, and they enter your bloodstream, which is how cancer metastasizes, and you can detect them through a blood test. This also can help increase survival rates and determine what sort of treatment will be effective on different types of cancer. So what I did at Epic was I was a data science intern, and I had to learn the coding language R, which helps to interpret data sets that were given to me by my mentors. So to break that down even more, I basically used R like a fancy calculator that could also read. So if you take an Excel spreadsheet and you turn it into a CSV file, it can be read by R if you input it into like the data set. So if you do that correctly, which it's kind of hard to do because R is definitely not beginner friendly, you can type certain commands into R and it will create graphs, scatter plots, and correlation plots. Next slide. So this was me trying to learn R, and the problem with me being a data science intern was that I know nothing about computers. In fact, the first day that I had my internship, which was over Zoom due to COVID, I had to have a late night call with one of my mentors, Audrey Gill, to teach me how to move a document from email into files on my computer. So I would use these certain things that you can download onto RStudio, which is essentially what you use to learn R, and they would give you little tasks on how to make sequences and how to add sequences. Like I said, it's basically a fancy calculator. Next slide. So as you can see, I started getting the hang of it. So after that, I was given real data sets to work with that were actual patients. I wasn't allowed to know really what was going on in them due to confidentiality reasons, but I basically learned how to take two different variables and make a scatter plot with them. But in order to do that, I also had to crash course statistics so that I could learn the difference between qualitative and quantitative data and what you could input into R, because like I said before, it's pretty finicky. So next slide. So that's me using Khan Academy to learn how to do statistics in order to use R. Aside from using R, I was also given, I guess, homework. So my mentors, Joseph Schonhoft and Audrey Gill, would give me certain topics to research on so that I could further understand the work that's done at Epic. So every night I had to research a topic like immunotherapy, chemotherapy, and MVAC chemotherapies, targeted therapies. I learned the difference between T cells and B cells and how different gene expressions can influence cancer treatments on different tumor cells. I also got to have 30-minute interviews with a bunch of different people who work at Epic. I got to talk to people who are in genomics, marketing, statistical data development, product developers, and even the chief of medicine. So, next slide. So this is a pretty basic scatter plot using two different variables, which are CD4s and CDH, which are different proteins that can be expressed on tumor cells, and there's a bunch of different things that tumor cells will actually express. So you have the HER2 gene, you have CD8s, CD4s, PD-L1s, PD-1s, and these can all affect what treatments will work and what don't, because some will be responsive to hormone treatment and others won't, depending on what they express, and this all in all improves survival rate for the patients. So next slide. So this is a correlation plot, which I had to essentially learn. What I had to learn was the qualitative and quantitative data, because if you try to plug in qualitative data where you're supposed to put in quantitative data, you're gonna get a huge error and have to go back like 15 steps to rewrite all the code. So yeah, like I said, it's not beginner friendly. Next slide. I eventually got the hang of it, and I used multiple different variables that has about 4 in it. And yeah, I would like to thank Audrey Gill and Joseph Schoenhoft and also everyone else at EPIC. I will be returning in the summer to work in the genomics lab. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Esther. For my senior project, I apprenticed with Sandy Klein, a clothing designer from my hometown in Brattleboro, Vermont. Sandy has a small clothing business called Sandy Pants, where she primarily transforms thrifted men pants into overalls for women. Sandy has been a mentor of mine since I was about 10 years old when I started costuming plays with her at the New England Youth Theater, where she's the head of the costume department. I've learned practically everything I know about sewing and clothing design from Sandy, and over the years of working together, we have become very close. This past February, I was lucky enough to be able to move into her spare bedroom and become her apprentice for 2 weeks. The planning process of this trip was a bit difficult due to COVID because we had to make sure we were doing everything safely. I ended up quarantining away from the rest of my family for about a week and then heading up to Vermont on January 31st. Sandy has 3 roommates who I'm also very close with because they used to act with my oldest sisters at NUIT. And I remember getting to Brattleboro around dinner time, and they were all waiting on the steps of the apartment building to unload my car. And that night we just ate dinner and played games, and it was really nice to see them all again after being apart for so long. On my first day, we celebrated Imbolc, a Gaelic holiday that welcomes the beginning of spring. And we all woke up at 5 a.m. and drove to the frozen reservoir to watch the sunrise. And even though we were celebrating the beginning of spring, we had to walk through about a foot of snow to get out to the ice. Each day, Sandy and I would get started in the studio around 10. Her studio was my favorite room in her apartment. It just had these big windows that looked out right over the river and had these really pretty twinkly fairy lights and just tons of fabric and a record player that was always playing 20 classics. To end our days, we would, all 5 of us, just watch movies or play games or just sit around and talk in the living room. For the beginning of my apprenticeship, we just worked on fixing all the Sandy pants that needed some extra help. It was a lot of adding buttons and zippers and sewing hems on pants and stitching this and stitching that. But after a few days, Sandy started to teach me to design and fully construct the pants on my own. There are 2 different kinds of Sandy pants. Those made from pre-existing men's pants and then the ones that we make from a pattern. Each pair usually takes around 1 to 2 days to finish. I'm actually wearing a pair of pants that I made right now. During the last week of my apprenticeship, Sandy and I created a new pattern for the Sandy pants, and we spontaneously decided to make a spring collection. So we spent hours and hours and hours in the studio trying to finish, which we luckily did. We made 6 pairs of pants, and they were all floral printed fabric pants that were all from a pattern, which is pretty new for Sandy pants because they're usually always made out of thrifted men's pants, but we used a pattern for these ones. This apprenticeship is not over for me. I intend to spend time with Sandy in Vermont this summer, and within the next couple of years, she's going to hopefully have a boutique in downtown Brattleboro, which she has asked me to help her come back and start, which I'm very excited about. And for the last few minutes of my presentation, I would like to share a short video that I made of my time in Vermont. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Linda Ripley. So, for the past year, I've been very curious about film development and the process that happens in the darkroom. My project was made up of a few different components, all of which revolve around photography. For context, I am obsessed with photography. I spent this time turning my basement into a darkroom, learning to shoot and develop film, and getting to know other photographers through interviews. When I started to think about creating a darkroom for myself, I reached out to some family members and other photographers who I knew had experience in this. They ended up telling me it would be a mess, it would be expensive, it would be just too difficult, and I got a lot of discouragement. After talking to them, I thought it sounded like a great idea, and I decided to do it. I would like to give a huge thank you to Miss Ingalls for mentoring this project. I called her a few hours before I developed my first role, and honestly, at the time, I thought I had it pretty much all figured out, but she walked me through the whole process. And there ended up being a lot I did not even think about, so she prevented me from making so many mistakes, which I am forever grateful for. I also received a lot of guidance from Steve Carlotta, who owns the Snap Shop on Railroad Street. He gave me a lot of advice, was so generous and supportive, and gave me one of his old developing tanks. Another part-time mentor I had was Professor Curtis Willocks. Curtis Willocks is a professor at FIT and ICP in New York City. I took a class with him last summer, and he's been an amazing mentor beyond that class. I also got to interview him while I was in New York. A highlight of my project was how thrilled I was after developing the first roll of film. It made me just think, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. I love photography. It also made me think, thank God I called Miss Ingalls before this. I did stumble over a few problems, but it ended up all working out, luckily. I had to heat up the chemicals to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So I was running the tap water as hot as it would go, and it wouldn't pass 50 degrees, so I started getting the tea kettle running. I had boiling pots of water, and it still wasn't getting anywhere near 80 degrees. Turned out that thermometer actually measured Celsius, not Fahrenheit. That was rough. But after developing them, it was so exciting unraveling the film and getting to see all the pictures I took. I added a page to my website showcasing some of the photos I took, and here they are. They can just kind of roll. Something I've found to love about film is the risk factor that's involved. So much now is designed to be easier or to help us in some ways, but there isn't really a lot of shortcuts when it comes to film. So I was challenged to focus and be really precise in order to not lose a week's worth of work. While shooting, there was no way really that I could tell if my photos were focused, if they were correctly exposed, if I was using the right settings. So it was a lot of guessing, but I enjoyed it. I put a lot more time into each photo individually than I normally would digitally, which I think I learned a lot from because I couldn't just take a lot and go through them later because I was paying a lot of money for film. I believe I grew a lot as a photographer throughout this project, learned skills I will continue to use, and made connections with people who have greatly motivated me. In continuation to my project, I plan to intern with Miss Ingalls this summer, who owns Avita Love Photography. I'm so grateful I had this time to work on this project, and I would absolutely recommend it to anyone interested in photography. And the main thing I got out of this project is that networking is one of the most important things, and connecting with others is most rewarding. Thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, thank you so much for being here. My name is Katie Rumin, and if you know me at all, you know that I play viola, but tonight I don't think you see any violas on stage. If you look hard, I don't think you'll see any, I guess. Because in this project, I did not study viola. I studied the theremin, which you might not know about. So next slide. So a bit of background. The theremin is the first electronic musical instrument, or one of the first for that matter, and it is also one of the only instruments you play without actually touching it. It was invented in 1920 by the Russian physicist Leon Theremin, or in Russian, Lev Sergeyevich Theremin, and yeah. So let me just show you. So, yeah. So this is the theremin, in case you haven't noticed. It has two antennas. This one controls the pitch, and this one controls articulation and dynamics. Let me show you. And this one's for articulation. Yeah. So you might be wondering, how exactly do I actually pull notes out of the air? Because this is basically just, I'm just waving my hands around in the air and there's really nothing else. Well, the technique is actually ironically similar to string playing. I just have to imagine that I have a string running from my right clavicle right here to the antenna, and just like an invisible string. And the way I measure the air is I have my root in like when I make a fist, and I use a ring shape between my index and my thumb for stability. And if I extend all my fingers and extend my wrist, that is supposed to be an octave above that lowest position. Out of tune. Interference. Sorry, got a tune. Yeah, so between these things is an octave. Sort of, so I can play a scale like this. Yeah, thank you so much. So another thing that's really interesting about the theremin is that I just want to thank my pianist Hannah Schufel, who's a junior at Chatham High School, for playing with me, but she's going to show me something now. So if Hannah, you can walk up on stage, I'm going to play something, and I just want to show you what happens when someone gets too close. interfering. So basically, I have to keep a 6-foot radius of any objects in this area, because if anyone goes closer, it'll interfere with the electromagnetic fields, which is why the theremin is the ultimate COVID-19 instrument. Next slide. So there's a lot of people I'd like to thank for this. First of all, I was able to work with 2 international soloists on this instrument. I know that's actually a thing. So I was able to attend workshops first. On the left is Lydia Kavana. She was originally born in Russia, but now is based in the UK, and she's held weekly workshops, which I was able to attend every Sunday during my project, and I still do from time to time. Through her, she gave me a lot of useful guidance when I first started, and I also met a lot of other people around the world who play it, and it was really great to have those connections. But my private lessons and most of my technique came from the other person on the right. Her name is Carolina Eick, and she's from Germany, based in Berlin right now. She was actually the one to develop the 8-finger position technique, which I use, and she's been instrumental, pardon the pun, in making the theremin a much bigger deal than it was. It's my intention to continue with playing this instrument and to move it into the realms of concert music, and not just to be relegated to be a horror film instrument, which is what a lot of people think of it as. And I hope that my presentation tonight dispels all those myths. I'd also like to thank my parents for being so supportive in my doing such an insane thing, and for financially supporting me, I guess, so thank you. But I imagine by now you all are sick of hearing me talk, so I'm just going to play something. I'll be playing The Swan by Camille Saint-Saëns, and Hannah Schuf will be playing piano, so I guess here we go. I guess that's it for me tonight. Yeah, thank you so much for listening, and have a good night, I guess.
Hi, my name is Jem Taylor, and I'm going to tell you guys about how I spent a year filming elements of my life and the Berkshires for a community in the mountains of Costa Rica. After I'm done speaking, I'll play you guys a 3-minute portion of the final video. I'd like to thank Ken Rote, who helped me during the planning of this project and the editing as well. Now, the story begins in 9th grade when I went for the first time to Costa Rica with the class trip for the Spanish program at this school. And while we were there, we stayed with the aforementioned community, and I was really impressed by the hospitality that was shown to us foreigners. And so I decided that in return, I would like to make a video for them of, how I lived, how, what it looks like where we are, because they had, been kind enough to do the same for us. And so we were supposed to return in April of 2020, but of course, that was peak pandemic season, so that got canceled. But I still went through and spent the whole year filming, everything I could, and this was especially, kind of, like based around the seasons, because, the seasons are specifically, spectacular here, and so I needed that time to capture, everything I could, and it really let me, explore and discover how beautiful our home is and how the Berkshires are, spectacular in their own special way. So I had a lot of fun with this process, but it did definitely have, pose some challenges and obstacles. And one of the first things that I ran into was my knowledge of cameras was mostly photography-based, and so I was required to learn a new set of skills, including how to fly a drone. I also recorded the script/voiceover completely in Spanish, and I also had to, do that recording process in front of a camera, which was a completely new experience for me. And I also was faced with several technological setbacks, like flash drives malfunctioning, my computer crashed during the editing process, and my drone got carried away several times by the wind. Despite these obstacles, however, I did persevere, and I proved to myself that I could consistently meet the goals I set for myself, even over such a long period of time. I want to thank everyone who helped support my journey, and thank you all for coming tonight. Now, without further ado, I'd like to play for y'all a part of my video about the seasons. Now, also, one sec, I chose this specific part because it is recorded in Spanish, but visually, the content is, more understandable for, you non-Spanish speakers in the audience. All right, go ahead.
La primera estación quiero mostrar es el verano. El verano es de los meses de junio a septiembre y es la estación más caluroso como en Costa Rica. Llueve mucho, la naturaleza es muy verde y llevamos camisetas y nos protegemos del sol. En esta parte del año, mis cosas favoritas de hacer son jugar al fútbol, por supuesto, nadar en la piscina, hacer deportes acuáticos y hacer caminatas por los numerosos senderos de la zona. Cuando pienso en el verano, pienso en relajarme. No hay escuela y puedo sentarme afuera con mi cámara y esperar a que los pájaros se sienten en una rama para poder sacar una foto. La próxima estación que quiero mostrarles es el otoño. El otoño se llama fall en inglés, que es caer en español. Esto es porque cada otoño, en preparación para los fríos meses de invierno, los árboles y arbustos pierden sus hojas. Antes de eso, las hojas se vuelven de colores brillantes de rojo, naranja, amarillo e incluso a veces rosa. Aunque el otoño dura desde septiembre a diciembre, el follaje colorido ocurre durante solo unas pocas semanas. Para noviembre los árboles no tienen hojas y la naturaleza está preparada para el invierno. El invierno puede ser muy bonito cuando llega la nieve que cubre todo en una elegante manta blanca. Sin embargo, cuando sale el sol y derrite la nieve, los árboles sin hojas y la hierba muerta quedan expuestos. El mundo parece un poco feo. Aunque no siempre es bonito, no hay experiencia como despertarse por la mañana y mirar por la ventana el mundo entero vestido de blanco. Además de la nieve, el invierno también es muy frío y ventoso aquí. A veces la temperatura se vuelve tan fría como menos 12 grados Celsius. Desde diciembre a marzo guardamos nuestras camisetas y bikinis y sacamos nuestros abrigos y equipo de nieve. Y finalmente, en marzo, llega la primavera. La primavera aquí es el momento de rejuvenecimiento. La nieve y el hielo se derriten dando paso al barro, a los brotes y a las pequeñas flores. La naturaleza renace y cuando llega junio, el ciclo se ha completado y el verano ha regresado. La primera.
Hi everyone, my name is Mattie Vandiver, and for my senior internship, I interned at Adam Paul Heller's studio in Norfolk, Connecticut, which is Adam's stone carving studio. Most of the time I spent with Adam was doing a process called honing. First slide. And honing is next slide. Honing is basically rubbing a stone with another stone, like a stone block that's a rectangle shape, and it's to get rid of any indents or rough spots, patches, and create an overall smooth surface on the stone. To do this, I first use a 2-grit block, then a 4-grit block, then a 6-grit block, and then by the end, it's really smooth. I honed this slate tombstone for probably over 10 hours, and then honed another limestone tombstone for around the same amount of time, and also worked on some other stones as well. So, a lot of honing. This slate tombstone was being created for a woman named Amy Ronnie, and after I finished honing all sides of the stone, Adam would continue his process, and first he paints the letters in brush calligraphy on paper. Next slide. I skipped a part. Well, while I'm honing stones, you have to dry the stone to see where the rough patches or the indents are. So with the hair dryer, I would dry it, and the darker spots would be the spots I would have to touch up more. Next slide. So this is Adam's calligraphy, and I attempted some calligraphy, but Adam makes it look a lot easier than it actually is, so I didn't do very well. Next, Adam transfers the letters onto the rock using transfer paper, and I helped transfer letters onto a stone for a dog named Daisy. Next photo. After Adam transfers the letters, he brushes them with washable paint, which is what's here. The next step is carving. Next slide. And this is the near-finished Ronnie stone that Adam carved. In addition to honing stones and trying to do calligraphy, I also learned how to use a typewriter. I sanded and painted boards for one of Adam's art projects. I shoveled snow, chopped and stacked firewood, and any other jobs around the studio that needed to be done. And I also learned the beginnings of how to actually carve stone. Next slide. So these are some practice letters I carved, practicing straight lines, curved lines, diagonal lines. This is also a lot harder than Adam makes it look. Every Wednesday, Adam and I would have lunch together, and we would always end up talking about the most fascinating things. One lunch, I complimented a tool he was using to slice cheese, and we spent the whole lunch talking about Norway and how dark it is there in the winter, and they eat freeze-dried fish. And then another lunch we spent talking about Jenny Holzer and projects that Adam is helping her with, and interior design, gardening, prayer rituals in India, music, just all kinds of stuff. One weekend, I was able to sit in on a client meeting that Adam was having, and a lady came in wanting to design a tombstone that was a bench made out of granite so that she could sit in the cemetery with her husband and have cocktails like she was still sharing a drink with him. One of the main things that I learned while interning with Adam was to slow down. Much of Adam's work and life runs on the thought process of really enjoying the process of what you're doing, not just working toward an end goal. As soon as I started the internship, I realized I was going to have to slow down. For example, with the honing, and also with the typewriter. I write a lot, but I usually handwrite things. So when you're using a typewriter, you can only really think a word or two ahead. You have to push each individual letter. And instead of with handwriting, you can think a sentence or two ahead. So I had to really slow down with everything. I've been trying to bring this more into my everyday life as well, and realize that not everything has to be done in that moment or done quickly. There's time to take a break, have a cup of tea in between. Last slide. So thank you all so much for coming, and thank you especially to Adam for giving me the opportunity to work with you and sharing your work and your life. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, class of 2021. So, as I mentioned, although there's a week of school left, we're going to end the school year here. You still have to come to school next week. Dear students, parents, families, friends, trustees, and colleagues, welcome to our slightly early, joyously in-person, off-campus, end of the school year assembly. Students, thank you for a great year under extraordinary circumstances. Parents, thank you for your trust and flexibility and for hanging in there with us through it all. Trustees, thank you for your steadfast support. And colleagues, most of whom are over here in this corner, thank you for putting aside the challenges and anxieties of your lives outside of school this past year to show up for these students day after day after day. In a moment, one teacher will speak to each class, symbolically bringing the year to a close and opening the door to a new one. In a more normal year and in a less grand venue than this one, there would be a small table here with 5 candles on it, one for each class in the school and one to represent the school as a whole. After each teacher speaks, she extinguishes the candle for the class, signifying the end of the school year. The candles are relit in September. The school candle burns eternally, and the senior candle remains lit until graduation. This year, the candles are obviously metaphorical. Following my colleagues' talks to each class, we will end with a poem by Robert Frost, Choose Something Like a Star, that is a touchstone for our school. Every student who has ever graduated from our school has learned that poem by heart, whether they remember it currently or not. We will also end with Steiner's morning verse, which we say together every morning. And tonight we'll just have to think of it as an evening verse. Speaking to the 9th grade will be Julia Nunez, to the 10th grade, Genevieve Brossard, to the 11th grade, Elizabeth Orenstein, and to the 12th grade, Ursula Wirt. Profe.
Oh my gosh, I can't see anybody, not even the 9th grade. Good evening, everyone. And dear 9th graders, you came here from many different schools and you bonded as a class and you had a good year. But what a year to start your high school experience. You didn't get a sense of the entire school. We didn't come together as a whole school for morning meetings. The Shakespeare play, which is so loved, didn't happen. You didn't get to begin the year with the Camp High Rock 3 days, getting to know your classmates. There were no field trips in the buses. We had no school assemblies with parents and friends, and we didn't have an all-school spring play. But we did have classes, and we had great times. Despite all this, 9th graders, you had a good year, which means it speaks strongly to the strength of your class. And we hope you will have a really different year next year where you get this feeling of the whole school. So we hope that you come back in the fall and experience what Berkshire Waldorf High School is all about. Our high school is really about relationships, about all of us being together. I'd like to share with you a very short poem by the French philosopher Teilhard de Chardin, and it says, "We are one, after all, you and I. Together we suffer, together we exist, and forever we'll recreate each other." Let me say that again. We are one, after all, you and I. Together we suffer, together we exist, and forever we'll recreate each other. 9th grade, I hope you have a great summer. We're looking forward to seeing you in the fall.
Can't see anything. Hi. So before I begin, I wanted to just have a little prologue in regard to the 10th grade. You were the class that I taught the most this year. We had 3 full classes. And kind of ironically, the class where I felt that I ended up knowing you the best was our Zoom class. And specifically, the mail art project, where each student mailed me a piece of art to my house. And I still owe them a response, so I want to acknowledge that. You will get your letter back this summer. I want to give it the attention and time that you all deserve. So I just wanted to note that because each piece was so beautiful, and thoughtful, and so different. Each one was so different. So I feel really honored to have those precious things in my possession. So thank you. Okay, so for the body of the speech or talk, advice, connection, whatever it is, I'm going to begin with a quote by the genius dancer and choreographer Martha Graham. She famously said, "There is a vitality, a life force, an energy that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium, and it will be lost. The world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, nor how valuable, nor how it compares to other expressions. It is your business to keep it yours clearly and directly, to keep the channel open." Perhaps this could be particularly relevant to you now as you cross the threshold into your last years of school. Perhaps you are experiencing the paradox of identity, where we all want to be seen as unique, yet also wish to be accepted, to fit in. This is an especially powerful push-pull during high school, but it is felt periodically throughout all of human experience. Allow me to reassure you at this space between life chapters on the edge of summer break that each of you is indeed extraordinary and that you are also accepted. You belong here. Thank you, but I'm not quite done. And now I'm going to end with some rather liberating words of wisdom, again from Martha Graham. What people think of you is really none of your business. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Orenstein. Dear 11th grade, a year ago, I spoke to you for our end-of-year assembly from my computer as each of us existed in virtual boxes and tried to feel some sense of community and comradeship. Here we sit tonight together as one school and one community for the first time in almost 2 years. We began the year exploring plant life with our botany seminar. We learned something of the language of plants, the communities of green things that have surrounded us in this year of such loneliness. You ventured far into the depths of hell, accompanying Dante on his journey into the bowels of the earth and eventually to a promise of redemption. And now you have finished the year with atomic theory, struggling with the smallest ways that we can know, becoming medieval knights through history, literature, and calligraphy with me, and learning to mark the bounds of our world with surveying, how we can understand the great forms of the earth around us. Last year, I bid you adieu as wise fools, as graduating sophomores, some perhaps significantly more foolish than wise. This year, you are rising seniors, soon to be leaders of our school and leaders of our community. My, how you've grown, and my, how you will rise to the challenge. This is an excerpt from Mary Oliver's Evidence. Beauty without purpose is beauty without virtue, but all beautiful things inherently have this function, to excite the viewers towards sublime thought. Glory to the world, that good teacher.
made it. Well, here I am. Good evening, seniors. Life as we know has changed dramatically during your last year of school. In these challenged times, you have developed resilience, courage, and despite these difficulties, you have continued to pursue your goals. Waldorf education and your teachers have equipped you with many important skills and knowledge. You are the future generation that will make change this world, and changes that are long overdue. I'm so proud of your accomplishments, and it has been such a joy to witness your love and your kindness and your tolerance to each other. It has been a great privilege to teach German at this school for so many years. And I will begin with you a new chapter, a new exciting chapter. And as Henry David Thoreau said, go confidently into the direction of your dreams. Live the life that you have imagined. And I tell you, with all my love and good wishes, seniors, I will just say now, tschüss.
Hi, Fabiette. No, you are getting off, Fabiette. Not yet. No, not yet.
Not yet?
No?
I'm done.
You're not done yet, Fabiette.
I'm not done. I must take my glasses off. Okay.
Dear Fabiette, I know this is probably what everyone who has ever written a retirement speech has said, but I promise you I mean it more than that. You have made an enormous difference in not only our lives, but the lives of everyone who's ever come to our school. Oh, God. Thank you for the laughs, the commitment, and yes, even the strictness. So here's a gift from the students and the parents.
Oh my God.
To show our gratitude. We love you, we will miss you, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Take me down.
Thank you, Soka. Students, please rise, and anyone else present is welcome to join them, colleagues. I'm going to leave the mic and just step out here to say this poem. We'll end the evening by inviting you all to graduation. No masks, no registration required. Sunday, June 13th, 5 p.m. at the National Shrine of the Divine Mercy in Stockbridge. We look forward to seeing you all there to help us send the class of 2021 on its way. Students, see you Monday. Thank you all for coming. Good night.